All right, everyone, we should be live with today's Sunday Q&A stream. Keep in mind, I have to make sure that that's actually the case cross-platform, so you must give me a moment. It's important, especially on Rumble. I think usually you have to start the placeholder video, then at some point you have to refresh it. It's a little bit arcane. I like Rumble a lot. Hello to everyone already watching there, but there are some quirks that I have to work through. So give me a moment. Yeah, let's see here. Come on, show me my stream. So I can distract myself by watching myself. It's Streamception. Yes, indeed. We are, I believe, live on Rumble. Let me get down to the chat here really quick. So yes, we have a full docket for today, but we have our first super chat actually by JD Spare. Hello, JD, sending 666 yen, I believe it is. Japanese yen, not the won. At some point after the SWIFT thing happens, which is now happening with regards to Russia and should happen with China, the won might have some problems. Anyway, we're going to get into various subtopics here, various news, because there's a lot of it, and I'll be talking about some of it, of course, tomorrow. But first, we'll go into Ukraine, of course. The first major update is that there is scuttlebutt that the Belarusians may declare war. Now, by declare war, an official declaration of war might be problematic. But as far as sending auxiliary forces, goods, and so forth into Ukraine to buff up Russia, they can. The third-party state's not a NATO member, and so we'll see if that actually happens. Some of the sources reporting this are fairly legitimate, others fairly illegitimate, and so I'm hesitant to declare that it's likely to happen. But as we've seen so far, because of the fog of war, especially online. The online world is now part of warfare, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on whether you believe in that or not. It can be difficult to get proper information. It can be very difficult to parse out what's true from what's either disinformation or people replicating like their opinions and pretending that they're absolutely real. It's difficult to tell. But yes, Belarus apparently, according to some reports, is planning some sort of action with regards to Ukraine, whether that's a declaration of war, helping Russia, which would be fairly likely. We do not actually at this time know. We also have to go a little bit into polling. This will be something that also is talked about tomorrow, not related to Ukraine, although that feeds into it. A couple of polls finally have come out right before the State of the Union, so I like this. It helps gauge what's going to happen over the next few days. I will try to be live during the State of the Union as well. I think it'll be like 2 or 3 a.m. here, so I will be caffeinated. I'll basically be skipping sleep for a night just to cover that. I'll be extra sarcastic, I promise you. So definitely on the 1st of March, 2 days from now, mark your calendars. You should definitely tune in. During the State of the Union, I will be doing a live stream, I believe, and it'll be interesting. Biden's first 2 polls post-Ukraine being physically invaded. We're not talking about the troop buildup, but the actual invasion by Russian forces. They couldn't be worse. He appears to be collapsing, actually, in support, presumably in part because people realize, and any reasonable, rational person does, that Biden's weakness is part of the reason why this is happening. The U.S. decided to cede effectively leadership to Germany and to others for NATO. Our own energy sector was pummeled for a year by Biden and lockdowners hitting the economy, making it harder to respond to such a thing. So that's not Trump's fault. I'll be getting as well into MSNBC's Disinfo with regards to Trump somehow being responsible. But Biden's polling, I had expected him potentially, in a proper framing, if the legacy media was successful in casting him as, well, he's a wartime president now, his approval would go up. He would be above his floor. Instead, it might be going in the opposite direction. We only have 2 polls, so I can't say that for sure. If it does go in that negative direction, though, if his disapproval goes through his soft ceiling and or his approval below the soft floor, oh boy, is it going to be one hell of a goddamn disastrous midterms for the Democrats. You may begin to hear calls from some marginal Democrats for resignation if that happens. It could actually happen. We could be on the precipice of a great happening. So be happy and aware of this fact. But anyway, to the MSNBC disinfo, before I get to the super chats, because this is a Q&A show, generally speaking, this is mostly to answer people's questions and then respond to their comments. MSNBC persists, as it has for days now, in having guests aboard. Link in the description, cross-platform. You can see that. By the way, there is a pinned comment if you're on YouTube watching there. Buy some of my books. Times are hard. I need more money. And you get something in return. So learn a little bit more about the occult. The supernatural does play a role, by the way, in memetics and psyops, so you're not missing out. MSNBC continues to harp on a line that I think only MSNBC's audience really takes seriously. I don't even know if the CNN audience would take this one seriously. The idea that the reason that Ukraine wasn't invaded under Trump was because Putin's puppet was in there and his whole goal was to weaken NATO. And so you have people posting bullshit about NATO supposedly being weakened by Trump, like his rhetorical questioning about the possibility of leaving NATO, which, of course, in context is, hey, NATO's not paying its fair share. They're not taking it seriously. We want them to do more, pressuring them to do more, which they did, thus strengthening NATO. NATO grew stronger under Trump. It was neglected under Obama, technically speaking, arguably under Bush, because he went it alone on everything. So that's, I mean, it's been completely debunked, the line that they're selling, but they keep posting about it over and goddamn over again. It's like, again, it's the metaphor of the monkey, the stupid monkey in the zoo. The other monkeys, after the experiment, eventually they learned if they press the button on the left, they get fruit. If they press the one on the right, it electrocutes their nads. One of the monkeys never got it. It keeps pressing the button on the right. It might be because it likes the color. It might just be masochistic. There's something clearly wrong with this monkey's mental state. Its psyche is damaged in some way. That appears to be the Trump derangement syndrome left at the moment with regards to the Ukraine situation. They've lost. A supermajority of Americans understand. Unfortunately, there are still some that don't understand this, that probably this would not be happening had Trump been appointed to the office that Biden unfortunately was appointed to instead. Honk, honk, duly elected. 80 million trillion votes. 10 scoops of ice cream. Just a second here. Something appears to be going wrong over here on Rumble. Just a sec. Let me reload this other tab. Come on, show me the money. Or just the chat. That's fine too. Yeah, it's going fine. Rumble does, by the way, I will state this. I like Rumble. I'm approaching 80,000 subscribers on the platform, and everyone that's not watching on Rumble, you should join me there as well. But there's a problem with the Rumble Rants chat section. Every time someone posts, it drags you down to the bottom of the screen. This is unavoidable. So, I mean, if you've got enough people watching, you get a super chat. You scroll to it. You start reading it out. It keeps scrolling down to the bottom. They need to, that should be their top number one priority as far as site design. That should be the number one priority, because streaming competition is a big, more open field than the one-off video thing. I hope Rumble tackles it soon. Like the site, glad to have almost 80,000 people following me there, but that design flaw needs to be addressed. It's basically like the exhaust vent on the Death Star or something like that. It's such a no-brainer. So hopefully that happens soon. We'll get to some super chats though right now. Michael LaRusso, just say no to Dementia Joe. Increasingly people are. If latest polling is any indicator, and one of those polls, Washington Post. Now the Washington Post drags things in Biden's favor because they still use the old metric where the Democrats had more registered voters. They weight their poll. And he's still at, I think, negative 19 in that poll. It's worse than the aggregate by a considerable margin. And that's the Washington Post. Again, individual polls can't give you a real number, but they can give you a trajectory, and they can give you a pretty good guess if you compare it with their other polls. If ABC Washington Post says negative 19, and the aggregate has them at negative, 13.4, I think it is, or something close to that, that's not good. That is severe negative movement. If that's prefaced on foreign events, the problem is that unlike the withdrawal from Afghanistan that damaged Biden's polling, that was a short-term thing. People have forgotten that there are still hundreds of Americans stranded there. They don't talk about it. It's going to be hard to ignore the Ukrainian situation, which is why elements of the legacy media continue to talk about it, but they frame it as Trump is responsible. Trump derangement syndrome over a year after he leaves office, it's not working. Hi, Leaf 11. So Russia is getting a bloody nose from this fight. Tell me, does this send memories of the Winter War with how unprepared? Yeah, potentially. Ukraine is better prepared as well. You got to understand than Finland was at the time during the Winter War, and was facing, a larger adversary technically at the time, but one that was embattled. Ukraine may actually pull it off. They've held Kiev for several nights in a row, despite direct attack by the Russians. They're claiming that they've wiped out entire columns of tanks. I can't corroborate that because I don't have any particular on-the-ground information. If somebody is in Ukraine or that area, if you can prove that you're in the area, you can give me some firsthand material that I can verify is actually there, please do send me some news tips. I'd be very, very interested in seeing it firsthand. I don't care if it contains gory combat footage. I just want the truth on the ground. Josh, Poopy Joe Braden's State of Denial will be fun. It'll be more fun watching my stream than watching the White House stream, though. I expect more than 5,000 people easily to tune in, maybe more than are tuned into the White House. Dr. Zeodin, the Ghost of Kiev is a new Ace Combat protagonist. It seems the Reds are getting as good as they are giving love your work. Yeah. Apparently the term comes from like a comic sort of thing. There could be a lone fighter ace over Kiev that is racking up the hits. That is still very much a possibility. The terminology is secondary. That being said, again, we can't verify that this is real. It could be multiple pilots. The entire thing could be completely false. We do know that the Russians have an established air superiority because otherwise their enemies would have already crumbled. That's not good for Russia, by the way, considering their massive manpower superiority and the fact that they had plenty of time to build up and prepare. It was downplayed by NATO originally. Third man, how do you think China will use this crisis? They'll make lots of moolah because they're very, very good at that. They're the ones bankrolling Russia, which is why kicking them out, and this is another update, the Germans and other NATO groups have kicked some of the Russian banks out of SWIFT, including their central bank. While this is meaningful, and it means that a lot of assets, they've been locked up or dried up. While that's meaningful and could cause some bank runs in Russia, by the way, which would be a big problem for Putin that he can control centrally, but then he risks protests, I guess. Kicking China out of SWIFT would be more meaningful. Cut off the actual purse. The purse strings of the Eastern Bloc are China. That is the purse string. It's not Russia. Russia's the tanks. Russia's the military grunts on the Western Front. The Western Front of the East. Xenomorph Gaming claiming there's no audio. That may be on your end. I believe it appears to be working well for everyone else. Dirty Dexter B on Twitch. It doesn't help that people think we should be helping Ukraine and we're not. Yeah, that's not good for Joe Biden. We should be sending lethal aid. I have no problem with it as long as it's paid for at some point. But my caveat to that is that we should also be giving lethal aid to the U.S. public. Everyone should have combat armor. Everyone should have flamethrowers and machine guns and real assault rifles, not the non-select fire civilian versions. Military weaponry. Yes, I should see tanks when I go down the street, when I'm in Rutland, when I go into town and, have a bite to eat or go shopping. I should see people with military gear on. I'm not intimidated by that. I think that it's cool. Long as I have just as much military gear as them. And we should subsidize it because it's an actual human right. The progressives want to subsidize healthcare. Why not weapon care? Aaron 1808, great to see you live. Congrats to you and your wife on the baby. Cats will sometimes attack other cats if they think they are sick or weak. They never had that problem before we moved here. The previous tenants here had at least one cat. I'm thinking that the scent of that really triggered them. and that's why they're all territorial. They are kind of calming down, but Yana does piss everywhere, and we're thinking it might be medically related, and so I'm going to be getting a piss sample and sending it off to the vet, and have to go through all that shit. Armorize. Have you seen the documentary Ukraine on Fire and Revealing Ukraine? These give the rest of the picture on the situation that's been going on since the Maidan protests. No, I have not. I'll keep those aside. Let me copy that out really quickly. Yeah. And of course, I can't actually do that from StreamYard. Anyway, Ukraine on Fire and Revealing Ukraine. Okay, I'll try to remember that. And documentaries are good. You know, Liz and myself love to watch that. And Eastern Europe's kind of more her bag than mine. So we'll take a look maybe. Dash 451 sent $5. No comment, thank you. Stephen 13. There are people celebrating dead Russians. Disgusting. War is hell. Both sides are human beings. This war needs to end now. I would agree. I don't celebrate any of the dead soldiers or civilians over there. I would point out that Russia is the aggressor. You can look at it situationally and say they were provoked by NATO moves or Ukraine or something. They are the ones that drew up the troops and entered a foreign sovereign nation. If this were the United States invading a foreign sovereign nation, most of those same people would have a problem with it and be saying that it was evil. The fact is that some of these people, like Caleb Maupin, they are simply East Bloc imperialists. They are convinced that the Eastern Bloc needs to take control of the world. They want communism or whatever. It's not entirely clear because some of these people are communists and yet they're supporting Russia. Russia's no longer a communist nation, but they still support it. It's clear. They're just imperialists. Small-minded individuals. Frost. I'm an American in Moscow currently, and my flight was canceled due to restrictions. It will be interesting to see where things go. Thanks for covering it. Yes, I think you can't even access Twitter probably right now without a VPN. If you can get out of Moscow and you need to come to the West, you might do it through Belarus. I think maybe Finland or something like that. Go through Kazakhstan, Kazakh Airlines. They've got Borat posters and shit. Jan sent $9.99 in euros. No comment. Thank you. Mr. Wonderful. German Chancellor speaking to Parliament calling for increase in arms spending and German offensive ability. We are now officially in the end times. I wouldn't worry about the Germans of today, considering the attrition of the 1940s. A lot of the Germans today are different than they were back then. The socialism's still there, and the quasi-imperialism maybe. But they are part of NATO and part of the European Union, which they try to lord over. Little bit different than it was previously. You do have competing major powers, major players. At this point, arguably the Visegrad Group, the Eastern European bloc created by Poland and Hungary mainly, and also I think the Czech and the Slovakians is a major thing. I prefer them to be the ones handling things. They seem more sane than the Germans. Gerald Armstrong just got in. Do we know if the Russians destroyed the largest airplane in the world yet? Heard they might have last night. I don't have any clue. Don't even exactly know what that refers to, actually. James Pixels. Gonzalo Lira is stuck in Kiev. Have you spoken, or are you guys on good terms? His view on arming the civilians is different to yours. He thinks it's dangerous and gangs are using the weapons. Thoughts? It's okay for gangs to have lots of weapons as long as everyone they could potentially target also does. Great equalizer. It's sort of like if everyone in the world had nukes, there wouldn't really be any wars because nobody would dare to fire the first blow. The Death Star. Even I have an exhaust pipe. Why do I get the feeling that that's a modified username off the Toolbox meme? You've got to get back into your lane. You've got to talk about screws and ratchets and things like that. I think that's the same person. Just saying. Sebastian Monroe, why didn't the WHO just say war is a super spreader? That wouldn't work at this point because people's fear wore off, months ago. So they can't do that anymore. Whoops. Mickle, though. It's kind of weird how everyone forgot about Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances, Ukraine getting rid of nukes in exchange for security assurances from Russia and US Britain. Violation by both. Yeah, exactly. The Ukrainians held up their side of the deal, and now they're getting screwed in the back by both main groups that gave them assurances. This is something, again, that the Rusky boos won't admit to. By the way, I probably should point this out. Again, I'll be unequivocal about this. This is my disclaimer that I'll put in the video for the shills, basically. I support the Western world. I am pro-America. I am pro-West. That does not mean that I don't have enormous doctrinal differences and ideological differences with those that actually run these countries. The United States run under at least a vaguely libertarian populism. That's good. It's not complete isolationism, but it's America first. It's not, we won't fight you if you fuck with us, but it's, we're not going to go in and randomly bomb a bunch of civilians, et cetera, et cetera. It's a more or less free market system, but it also means that if China's screwing with free markets and free trade, tariff war, et cetera, it's pragmatic libertarianism after a fashion. That's what I fight for. I support my country. I support the Western world. I'm unapologetic about that fact. That doesn't mean that the leaders of this block of countries haven't done terrible things over the last few decades, especially. W was nuts. Obama was arguably more nuts, especially in the wake of Crimea. And the VP at the time is now in charge. I wonder why our situation has gotten worse. The cat is over there harassing poor Liz. The Grizzly, just painting some D&D minis. There are alternatives. Basic fantasy, RPG, and dungeon crawl classics are my go-tos. Don't support woke companies and start building your own alternatives. Replace globalism. Yeah, learn a new skill. Make your own things. You'd be surprised at what you're capable of if you put your mind to it. Make soap. Soap is easy to make. Grow your own crops. Learn how to cook them. People should become more independent. States should become more independent. Enough of the globalistic horseshit. Chuck Morris, Salty Frog. And that's by emojis. Thank you. By the way, with the cat, sometimes I joke that Yana is being like Russia and Farah's like Ukraine. It's my sense of humor. I know it's not a funny topic, you know, war and stuff, but, you know, the cats are funny, except when they piss on things. Gerald Armstrong, Real Life Lore, has a great video on Ukraine. I like to think that this is a great video relating to Ukraine, at least in part. Sebastian Monroe, glad to see you're watching Townsend's. Given that we're both New Englanders, perhaps there could be a collaboration with Vermont history. That's an interesting idea, actually. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Townsend's, some of the stuff there looks really, really good. By the way, I want to try that, what was it, crab cake or crab salad or something. They didn't like it and they thought it was weird. I'd like to try it, though. You know, stuff from the 1800s. I have encountered cookbooks from that various period, especially from the 1800s. Some of the things in there are wild compared to what people cook today. In part because full-on globalism wasn't there, so you had to make do with a more limited variety of spices and fruits and things like that, a lot of which was seasonal. And so you get some really, really interesting dishes. Amazon. How many politicians support Ukraine for altruistic reasons and how many support them for other reasons? I think that a small number of them genuinely do support Ukraine. I think that a lot more of them are doing it for street cred, effectively. They don't give a shit. They don't give a shit about their own border. Why the hell would they care about Ukraine? You think Kamala Harris cares about the Ukrainians? By the way, it was very, very funny. Kamala, and the legacy media, by the way, has not mentioned this since. Kamala goes over to Eastern Europe to negotiate, and 2 days later, war breaks out. What a good choice for VP. She should definitely be our first female president. She'll whip things into shape, not like that orange orangutan diaper-filling Trump, right? Brian Carter, happy Sunday, my dude. Yes, celebrate the Lord's Day. Now, which Lord that is remains to be seen. Stephen 13, there is a video of a Russian tank flying the Soviet flag. Well, yeah, but I mean, there are also Nazi flags on a couple of Ukrainian tanks, so it doesn't really matter. They have wide latitude. Once they're in a combat situation, while they're getting orders, they can kind of customize their experience, and nobody's really going to say anything about it, because what are you going to do? You're going to, the tank flew the wrong flag, so you decided to withdraw them under fire? I don't think so. Who cares if they want to fly the Soviet flag? It just gives you an idea of the mentality of some of the people involved in this conflict. But don't think that that necessarily speaks to the larger opinions. Styxhexen Phillips, please retake your throne. The screws have come loose. You're speaking of Biden. I get the reference. Not a banned account. Will Biden's victory over Russia help in the midterms? Oh, Biden's not doing shit. Eastern Europe mainly is involved, and Western Europe through funding and stuff. Biden's not doing anything. He even punted on Nord Stream sanctions. He might try to take credit. Nobody reasonable will take it seriously, but nobody who still supports him is reasonable. That's about 40% of the population, supposedly. Sebastian Monroe, did you know cats can detect a woman's pregnancy? Yes, I have heard that, actually. I'm assuming pheromonal, rather, in nature. By the way, we have a super chat over on Rumble. So hello over there. How many people are watching, by the way? It's almost 500 people watching on Rumble. We're close to overtaking InfoWars. I want to do it before 80K. Just a friendly competition. So disclaimer, I'm not starting shit with Alex Jones or anything, but yeah, I think it'd be funny. Clankdom is great. Spud Ferret. Japan never attacked the U.S. mainland due to an armed populace. The comedy The Russians Are Coming has a scene where the Russian sub is stuck in a small town harbor and everyone shows up armed. That sounds interesting. Yes, although that is partially apocryphal and not entirely true, the plan to invade the U.S. mainland was never seriously held by the Japanese. Of course, the manpower differential was too great. They were engaged in naval conflicts. They were distracted elsewhere. The basic premise was at least mentioned, and it was immediately overruled, and they realized it was a bad idea. And yes, indeed, the fact that the U.S. population was well-armed was a big part of that. I support giving military weaponry, armor, everything else to the whole Western population. There should be 10 times as many military weapons, tanks, armor, etc. in the world. It's just that it shouldn't be in the hands of groups that are going to be commanded to go fight. It should be in the hands of people who are reluctant to fight and don't want to be fucked with. That's what we need. Everyone should have bulletproof vests and fucking plate armor and missiles and flamethrowers, which you can actually get a flamethrower just with an ID in the United States, just to be clear. A military grade one, to be clear. Everyone should have these things. Yeah, we should ban all gun control. Fuck them. Vault of the Future, 1 out of 2. What would you say about a sort of fusion of capitalism and UBI where you have a robot work for you, construction, delivery, etc.? I think that's energy inefficient, the concept of robots in general, unless they're single purpose, like the kind of so-called robots, like the robotic arms you have in an assembly line in an auto plant. That's fine. If you're talking about semi-autonomous, walking around cybernetic beings, they're not very efficient. They have a limited role. Apparently, they're trying to take those fucking dog robots from Boston Dynamics and put them on the border. And I'm like, it'd be nice if you would guard the border until they become advanced enough to make a difference. Okay, what are they going to do? Chase down the illegals and bite them or something? You can have actual heads on them, like an actual dog's head. Otherwise, what's it going to do? It's just going to follow someone around and film them. An actual human has to go out to the call. Mr. Wonderful. Ghost of Kiev was a video game footage. Multiple news outlets, including Australian media, reporting Snake Island 13 are still alive. What is real anymore? Nothing. That's what I warned about days ago. In the fog of war, you're not going to necessarily know what's real. You're going to get disinfo from Ukraine, from NATO groups, from Russian media, certainly from Chinese media, but you get disinfo from them only every single day. And yes, the Lucent Archangel, yes, it was indeed the stewed crabs with the anchovies from the Townsends. I'm thinking anchovy and some of these other terms. One problem, and they alluded to this in several of their videos that we watched literally last night. One problem is that when you talk about the ingredients that you're using, like say it calls for wine or beer or anything, they're not necessarily the same as they are today. Beer, for example, back then was not a Budweiser. These were brewed, they were sour. They were not flavored by hops. They were flavored by spruce. Technically, unless they're using a spruce beer with an undifferentiated yeast, they're not making the original recipe at all on Townsend's. They should look that up. Wine. If you're taking mid-18th century wine, mostly what they meant was wine mixed with water. It wasn't pure wine at all, not until fairly recently, and certainly it was more sour. It would have had a different flavor. A lot of the mushrooms. Well, they didn't have the kind of button mushrooms that are propagated now. They wouldn't have been using those. They would have been using mainly Boletus or Morels or something like that they gathered wild out in the woods. I've done it myself. Maybe fairy ring mushrooms, They would have found a few button mushrooms, but they weren't grown like in caves in massive quantities or something. I know this has nothing to do with politics, but it's an interesting subject. I am no expert in culinary history, but I've read cookbooks and I've gone through and I've tried to source some of the stuff. You'd be surprised about the differences. Beer was a stimulant until the last 100 years. it was a stimulant. The hops that are kind of a depressant, they didn't exist in the beer at the time. They didn't exist. They weren't used except in special brews. Vault of the Future, 2 out of 2. UBI, but there's a role in the market being filled. You could invest in a more lucrative robot and they could reproduce payout to reconcile costs. That sounds like a very bad idea when you could just use human labor, which is more efficient. A human requires less input. The robot requires a lot more maintenance and cost, ultimately. It's good if you have a single-use robot for efficiency's sake, mechanical systems. Once you begin, especially adding a bunch of microchips, where does the minerals come from for the microchips? Oh, wait, it's from China. I think that could backfire, actually. John Hoyle. Are the cats big boned or are they a bit chubby? They were fatter before. They've lost some weight. They're a little bit chubs, especially Yana, but they're not obese or anything. AIM, why is Ukraine's The West Fault? Featuring John Mearsheimer. Must watch video to understand the Russian perspective. Interesting. People can watch that. Lipo battery. Russia and Ukraine propaganda is insane. The same video will get posted over and over with a different story every time. No truth anywhere. Thanks for the bids. Yeah, again, as I warned, you're not going to know where the war footage is from. From a distance, can you tell which side is fielding the troop carrier or the truck or whatever that just got bombed? No. They're using similar kinds of aircraft. They're using similar, at least last-gen tanks, although they've differentiated more. I don't think Ukraine has Armada tanks. I think they have some Abrams. They're different on that end, but a lot of them look the same. And so unless they're flying the flag, and that might be a literal false flag, pardon the use of the term, you're not going to know. Dan Miller, $4.99, thank you. Yeah, Abel Delta, you are correct. Nutmeg in everything back then. Yes, that was a very common additive along with cloves, actually, which I like. I think cloves are great. Rodrigo Ribas, Styx, Dow have great geostrategists anymore in the West? Do we have great, the spacing on your comments alone. Do we have great geostrategists anymore in the West? It seems like we all suck. We don't have any talent at all. That's a black-pilled opinion. There are definitely problems with the West, but they are capable of being amended. There are plenty of people who want to convince you that they're not because, you know, they have their own ulterior motives. They want power. That's basically what it boils down to. Spurger King, what bands are you listening to at the moment? This time of year, for some reason, I really get into dark wave, like 80s retro, like Susie and the Banshees, the Bauhaus, and stuff like that. I don't know. I know it's the cheerful time of year. I guess I have to counterbalance it with the frowny, tousled up black, you know, dyed hair sort of thing. I just find it invigorating. And then in summer, I listen to a lot of psychedelic rock. And then in fall, like I start getting into like black metal and grindcore and stuff. It's sort of seasonal. HTM 101, you alluded to this in your BitChute exclusive, but if Taiwan is taken by China, how will this affect us? You can look for the cost of everything to skyrocket, probably even more than because of a fuel crisis. Keep in mind that Taiwan produces a massive, massive number of electronics because they have a shit ton of minerals and manpower to do it. We should be preparing to preemptively defend Taiwan. I don't care if we put U.S. nuclear missile platforms there and start another goddamn Cuban Missile Crisis, because the alternative's 10 times worse. Giovanni Rivera. Hey, Styx, going to be a little cryptic because I know, but brother is watching on YouTube. But do you still believe the U.S. should mushroom cloud the land of Winnie the Pooh over COVID? Maybe not mushroom cloud, but they should be shut out of the world economy, and not just because of their development of COVID, which is proven now. It's not really up for argument. They can pretend strategic ambiguity on the issue. Opinionated junkie. I support neither side in the war, just watching. Yeah, support your own country, exactly. The U.S. doesn't need to be directly involved. But if we want to sell weapons to a group, I don't have a problem with that. Fire down below. Styx, what happened to your merchandise? Well, the merchandiser withdrew. Things fell through because they didn't have the time to continue their operation because it was a small operation. Looking into it, eventually there will be merch again. For the third time, I am having some issues with human reliability at times, I will admit. Joey O, I lost the Kievs to my tank. Cry me a river. What's for Niper? It's borscht here in my Kharkiv. Wow. Chuck Morris, the boomers are dying. They intend to take the rest of us with them. Change my mind. That's possible. Yeah, maybe it's just they hate the world because their age of Aquarius never happened. And, you know, they ran out of hippie chicks to bang. And, you know, they've been in a cocaine days since the yuppie days. And it's screwed with their mind some. A guy under a bridge sending this from 20 minutes back in the video. It's like bootleg time travel. Or one of those time capsule things they had us make in school. Enclave number 1. Giovanni Rivera. Hey, Styx, going to be a little bit cryptic there, and you already sent that super chat. If you paid twice, you can get your refund, I think, for the second one. Not a banned account. Biden leaves office. Will Harris be allowed to lead? She can't lead anything except to lead Willie Brown on. Now, that being said, I mean, she'd be in the position. It's just she'd be a lame duck from day one. She'd be even more disliked than Joe Biden after a few months. Joe Biden's dentures. It appears that masks have evolved into a part of the uniform for the leftist. Are the Branch Covidians a cult or a religion that worships science? It ain't science that they're worshiping. It looks a lot like the medical shit that I've seen from the early 1800s, like the Petit Albert saying if you want to ward off the miasmus, you take a dead dog skull, post it up at the edge of your village, fill it with herbs, and burn it at night. Keep the miasmus away. Josh, video on term limits for politicians. I did do one last month, I think it was, or the month before that. I actually oppose term limits, generally speaking. It's not helpful. Maybe age limits would be more helpful. Viking Woman 1988. Did you know the U.S. offered safe passage to Ukrainian President Zelensky while ordering the entire population of Kiev a goddamn curfew? Curfew? Yes, indeed. We offered safe passage, but he refused and said, fuck you, I'm staying. That's one up for him. The Grizzly, do you think that the Dems are going to crash and burn due to the constant infighting and id-poll nonsense? Oh, they already are. Again, one of the things in this video, the Biden polls. You just got 2 post-Ukraine invasion polls showing him collapsing in support, and one of them is from the Washington Post. They add points effectively to his total by using the old previous metric where the Democrats had a +5 advantage in registration. So it's weighted. And they still find him down 19 points. What a goddamn referendum. They've already crashed and burned, and they know it. That's why they're pulling out all the stops to try to blame this on Trump, and it's not working, thankfully. Because bullshit. Dr. Zeodin, crawl out through the fallout, baby, when they drop that bomb. I'll hold you close and kiss those radiation burns away. I like that song, by the way. You should look up Crawl Out Through the Fallout, along with the rest of the expanded Fallout 4 list of music, which I think you can find on YouTube. There is a mod for that if you play Fallout 4 as I do. It is on Nexus Mods. I know that that's problematic to some people right now. There's some fucking problem, drama bullshit going on there. But I mean, I've already got the mods, so I'm not going to stop using them. Designer V, did you know cats can detect a failure in swiftly taking over Ukraine? Mine is a lot calmer today. Yes, indeed, the Ukrainians have held Kiev for a second night. We'll see what happens in other areas of the country. They're claiming that they blew up an awful lot of tanks, but again, I don't have direct confirmation and probably won't. Vault of the future. Yeah, like a self-driving car that does food delivery or a construction robot that works on skyscrapers, one being more lucrative than the other, of course. If robots are replacing jobs that are exceptionally hazardous, like cave rescues or something, I think that's good. I don't like self-driving cars. I think it's a terrible idea, and I would never use one. Not even if mandated. If they ever tried to mandate all cars must be at least semi-autonomous, I guess I'd have to learn how to ride a bike finally. A bike with a good heating system. You know, there are ways to rig that up. Maxwell with Schulz. Hey, Styx, what's your opinion on the recent AFPAC gathering? Did you watch any of the speeches and your opinion on MTG being there? I did not watch any of these things. Holy crap, I didn't know Styx was on Twitch, says American Exile. Well, you know now. And quickly rising up towards 5,000 people following the channel. The Grizzly, also what caused the roll in id poll, and how did it become so entwined in the core of the Dem platform to the detriment of the Dems to the point of ceding education to the right? Yeah, that's something unforeseen for them, I'm sure. What happened is the Democrats didn't have the advantage on economics because they want to raise taxes, etc. They didn't have the advantage on anything. In the wake of Reagan, they had to reshuffle things. They had to undergo a paradigm shift. What we're in right now is the death throes of the Reagan-Clinton paradigm. The Democrats maintain neoliberalism, but they needed some way to differentiate themselves from the GOP because the GOP had Reagan as a symbol. They didn't have a Reagan. So they took effectively Reaganistic politics. They injected some id poll and said, well, the welfare component that we are maintaining is based partially on race, gender, and things like that. These are the issues that matter. When the Cold War ended and, foreign policy and some other things weren't a problem, that worked really well. It doesn't work really well anymore. There are other problems that people have on their minds. You can look over the next decade for the Democrats to undergo another paradigm shift reactive to Trump, oddly enough, especially if he wins re-election or someone like him that he endorses, like DeSantis. And it'll be something to see. I can't even predict what form the Dems will take after that, but it'll be probably hilarious. Gerald Armstrong, seems like nukes are on the menu. No, they're not. It's all bluster from the Russians when they say we're at the highest level of nuclear readiness. Who fucking gives a shit? Press the little red button already then, bitch. Triggers McNickers. With NATO, Russia, and China funded by the same fiat-mongering, war-profiteering globalists, what are the chances for a perpetual war scenario described in 1984, now that nationalism has returned? Getting less and less by the day, actually. That's the positive part. The positive part is that more and more people are waking up. The lower classes are starting to amalgamate around populism. This is why the globalists went whole hog, trying to censor and condemn and do the id poll thing. They're desperate. They're not doing it. I mean, why would they want to change things up and put in more effort, money, and time unless they were losing? Inquisitor Jack. The default position on government functions should be abolishment first, privatization second, and minimalism if absolutely needed, and constantly trying to make government obsolete and null. I don't want to make it null. I want to make it very, very small. It hasn't been that way in quite some time. Smaller it gets, the better it gets, up to a point. At some point, if the state's too weak, some other power group, some other power core comes up. Even if it's the people, well, then you get direct democracy. That's even worse. Not a banned account. Which European and North American cryptids are real? I don't exactly know. I think there might be something in Lake Champlain, based on my understanding of biology and some of the evidence. It's not a plesiosaur, but it's something, an extra large sturgeon, which would fit in. Maybe sea sturgeon population that managed to mate with the native population, many hundreds of thousands of years ago. I think Bigfoot is plausible based on the locations of most of the sightings. The idea of a Bigfoot in Ohio or something, that's bullshit. The idea of the original sightings out in the Pacific Northwest, at least plausible. It is possible. The Yeti, potentially, although not likely considering the climate, et cetera, et cetera. Robot Trucker, can you release any books in audio form? That would require even more effort on my part for in many cases, books that are labor of love. So I would pass on that. MGS fan 8494. Hey man, have you covered some Russian banks being kicked from SWIFT yesterday? Yes, indeed I did. As of right now, I think a large number of Russian banks can't access the world's banking system effectively. That is significant, but it would be more significant if it was extended to China. And please don't send any more super chats because actually I've got a shit ton to go through still, but of course I got to go off and do other things at some point. Jameson 4420. Yo, Styx, what are your favorite tomatoes to grow? I love Berkeley tie-dye and Paul Robeson for beefsteaks. San Marzano are prolific and great for sauce, and sun sugars are my favorite cherry style. I like little grape tomatoes just to eat right off the vine, and Roma tomatoes, of course, but I mean, for sauce, that's a mainstay. Also, there's the Cherokee Black, Cherokee Purple. It's an heirloom variety. And Brandywine. Brandywine best for tomato basil and soups and things like that. Anything mixed with herbs. Philip Black. Do you think rumors of Putin having cancer or dying might be true, and this is why he's making his move? No, I think that's probably propaganda. John Wells, use a company called Farm Focused for merch. Small company from Nebraska. Great people. They can fulfill what you need. But I'm not a farm. I'll look into it, though. Farm Focused. Let me actually write that down really quickly. I'll look into it. Shiva Blaster. We need a Styx salty cracker ticket. Yes, I am running for every elected office for which there's no clear good candidate, or which there's someone running unopposed. I'll be mentioning that in a few days. I had to do other things first. Ryoga 808 finally caught your live stream to congratulate you on the road to parenthood. Here's the little Styx if it's a boy, and Hex Girl. It is a girl, actually, a kleine Maisha. So thank you. Shifty Russian, how's it going? It's going well. Brando Commando. Breaking, Putin just made a speech activating nuclear defense systems and rapid nuclear response. Massive motorcade scene leaving Kremlin at high speeds. Well, I mean, if I get ghoulified later on at the Yumbo, I've already played Fallout, so I know how to scav the wasteland. I can't patrol the Mojave and wouldn't see the U.S. again because none of the ships would work, but I can patrol the tidal flats and I can attack the Mirelurks. They'll glow in the dark, so it'll be easy to see them, and pop them off. But anyway, that's fairly standard. Russia's in a state of war. Of course, they've activated their nuclear systems. Sounds like some fear-mongering, actually, from the West. Mr. Wonderful, YouTube takes a 30% cut of any super chat over $5. If you want to support Styx, buy his merch and books. Don't finance censorship. Yes, there is a pinned comment if you're watching on YouTube to my blog spot. It's one of the 2 blogs for my books. Go on through it. You'll find all sorts of weird shit. Herbal medicine. Mainstream medicine might be obliterated by Putin's nukes. Maybe you need to know how to use roots and herbs to cure your ailments. I don't know. Anyway, it's interesting history. Tens of thousands of pages of overall material that I've carefully edited over the course of many years. Yeah, you should take a look at it. Cheese. Thoughts on Senator Inhofe retiring early? He's 84 and got reelected in 2020. Thoughts on Zombie McCain crying about not being able to see this war? Yeah, McCain would be sad. He would have loved this because he likes footage of people dying. Probably the only way he could get it up at his age. I don't have any thoughts on Senator Inhofe. I'll have to look that up, actually. Brian Carter, how dedicated are Russian soldiers to this cause? It depends on which group of soldiers. It depends on where they're from, their ideology. Some people are Putin fanatics, and other people are like, well, I joined the military, I wanted a meal. And that's the way it is in most militaries, including the U.S. military. Dr. Zeodin, Styx, what are those things? Idpol, breadtuber, breadline, breadliner, astroturf. Idpol is identity politics, so like bitching about race and gender instead of substantive issues. Breadtubers and breadliners are the same thing. It's a collective of commies that make content mainly on Twitch and YouTube. And to astroturf is to pose as though it was an organic thing, but it's not. So like the Justice Dems getting Elon Omar, AOC, and so forth in there. They posed as grassroots individuals. Well, I'm just, I'm a normal person and I want to help my fellow man and I believe in welfare. Really, they were backed by millions of dollars of corporate money that had been laundered through the Justice Dems. It's an astroturf. It's not real. In other words, like astroturf, the literal definition is instead of like an actual lawn, like grass, it's plastic. It looks real sometimes, but it's not. It looks authentic. Zach the Celtic Sky. Can't wait to see the next Pew Research poll on Russia's global image now amidst this crisis. Their reputation, along with China's reputation, is done. Well, I mean, not necessarily done. Remember, they invaded Crimea in 2014 and they recovered from that. So, Steady Eddie 1983. Biden himself said he didn't expect sanctions to work. Based on that statement alone, did he just admit he has no plan? He doesn't even plan his own meals. He doesn't plan how to dress himself in the morning. Not surprised at all. Donna K, I see people saying that Putin is destroying biolabs in the Ukraine and trying to destroy the deep state. Is this Q propaganda? Yes, it's effectively bullshit. Coming from the usual idiots. Malpin probably has a hand in it. Brando Commando, U.S. freezing Russian central bank will cause the dollar reserve currency to collapse faster. It's clear that this will be the West versus East money system. No, the dollar will weather it, but it will cause economic problems in the U.S. and Europe, absolutely, and all over the world. Just to be clear, anything that you rely upon will go up in price soon, so just take it from me like maybe some of you did a few years ago. with the lockdowns, it might be time to stock up a little bit. I'll be going, I guess I need to get more chow mein noodles because I've gotten into those. And I do a damn good chow mein, by the way. I know that my camera quality is not the best, but trust me, it is not bland. Just to be clear, I can make chow mein. It's not that fucking hard. Inquisitor Jack, we need a modernized militia act specifying what arms and equipment Americans should be required to own and maintain. Pacifists can do medical and support. Yeah, good idea. I believe in conscientious objection. I don't even think they should be forced to do medical or something. But yes, people who want, they should be able to get free ammo and free body armor and stuff. It's great. And they should be able to buy more, and it should be subsidized. Now, let's ramp up the U.S. arms industry 10 times more. Make some jobs. Not a banned account. Was Senator Armstrong in Metal Gear Revengeance right? I never played Metal Gear Revengeance, so I don't know. Maybe. Ty Sloan, thoughts on people in the Biden admin begging China to help with Russia? That was an epic fail, just to be clear. Biden apparently Biden had Milley asking the Chinese to help to constrain Russia. If this story is true, and it seems to be, they're even more nuts than I expected. And I think the last one here, it is over on Rumble. Stephen Michael. Hey, Styx, can you give my YouTube channel a shout out? Middle-aged Medal of Honor. And there's the link there. For those of you on Rumble, you'll see it directly. Thanks for the great commentary as ever. Yeah, so there's a shout out. Although you're also technically shouting yourself out on Rumble. So you're there. Almost 1,000 people actually peak watching. Over 3,000 on YouTube. It's the live streams are more popular, it seems, lately. Anyway, I think that I'll go off. We're coming up on an hour anyway. And of course, you got to make dinner and stuff like that. Go to the store. We got one more here. Icky Concrete. Putin has very carefully alluded to there being something else or bad being the primary objective. If he isn't lying, what could it be? Well, he's lying. There's no other objective. He wants the breaking off of these particular East Ukrainian regions. If he had evidence of some massive Western scandal to make bioweapons or something, he would tell people. He'd tell people flat out because it'd be good propaganda. He wouldn't allude to it. That wouldn't make any sense. Bigfoot is in Ohio, Styx. Sorry to burst your bubble. No, it's clearly not. That particular legend is mountainous and far western in nature. And later on, if you look at the timing of the sightings, it spreads out from the Rocky Mountains. It's interesting how they were only seen in one relatively limited remote area at first, and now people claim to see as apes in Florida, and it's probably an escaped chimpanzee or something. Anyway, I'm going to go off now because I've done my bit. Keep in mind, I will be going live during the State of the Union on the 1st. I don't know exactly what time local it'll be. It'll be dark here, obviously. It'll be the middle of the night. I do have extra energy drink available for that. It is very, very important. I expect probably twice or maybe 3 times as many people to be watching that, in all honesty. It's going to be major. You can expect Biden to bloviate about Ukraine and distract from his economic problems, the U.S. border, et cetera, which is really fucking coincidentally convenient for him, by the way. That's about all. Peace out.